Welcome to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast. Well, thanks for joining us on the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast today. We have got Simon Corbey, who's the CEO of the Alliance for Sustainable Building Products. He's also a chartered surveyor and has a master's in architecture, has a master's in architecture, advanced energy and environmental systems, and he's also got a thesis on the bed said lessons, which I've just had to ask him about. So he's going to, and now he's going to tell us about very shortly. He's worked at London's first green building store. He's been involved with the B&Q product range. He's basically done loads and loads of stuff, and also setting up the One Planet products. So I am going to turn it over directly to Simon. First of all, many thanks for joining us today, Simon.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, and thank you very much for the invitation. It's really nice to be here.
Amazing. Well, can you start a little bit maybe by telling us about yourself, what you do, and also a little bit about your the journey, really, if that's all right.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I trained as a chartered surveyor, and had a variety of different jobs, and qualified whilst I was working at Dartford Borough Council as their valuer and economic development officer. So the council had a really wide portfolio of different buildings, including theatres, libraries, shops, houses, wayleaves, easements, etc. An interesting introduction, I suppose, to the built environment, how it can be managed. But I didn't really feel that it was really my home, so I got qualified and immediately went travelling. I sort of set off. I had no idea really how long I was going to be away for, but I ended up being away for 4 years. So I ended up working in Australia and in New Zealand. So I worked as a valuer in New Zealand, in Wellington for Valuation New Zealand, and then in Hong Kong as a teacher, and finally came back to London while sailing a Chinese junk. So my colleagues sailed the junk all the way from Hong Kong, and we sailed. I got on in Egypt. I wasn't quite sure it was going to survive the journey, to be honest with you. So I thought if they can get to Egypt, it'll be safe. I can get on. So I got on in Egypt, and we sailed across the Med and back and through, and then up the Thames, and they lifted up Tower Bridge.
Oh, brilliant.
So the idea was that we would get back for the handover, Hong Kong handover back to China, 1997. We were about 6 months late. There's quite a story associated with that journey, including being arrested,
Oh, wow.
charged and held in India, and kicked out of Vietnam. And that's another podcast in itself. So I arrived back home after 4 years of being away, and I love being away. I mean, it was just such an opportunity to see Asia and to experience some beautiful countries and some beautiful places. And I was lucky because I could live on the junk in St Catherine's Docks, right in the centre of London. And it was at that point that I was pretty broke and thought, right, okay, got to get a job. So I looked around and I thought, well, what am I going to do? I don't really want to be a sort of chartered surveyor just getting money for people who've already got money. That really wasn't my thing. And so I wanted something deep and meaningful. If I'm going to work at it all day, every day, it's got to be something deep and meaningful, and it can't be just sort of property management and maintenance. So I knew that I wanted to work in the sort of new field around sustainability. And then a friend of mine told me about construction resources, which happily was literally along the Thames in Southwark. And so I thought, well, okay, he said it's this new eco place. You should go and check it out. So I did. I thought, well, I'll pop in there and see what it is. And walked in, and I immediately knew this was somewhere really, really special. So I walked in, and it was just off Southwark Street and yeah, I mean, it was an absolutely amazing place. So it was set up by a chap called Richard Handyside, who was actually a publisher, and he'd made a lot of money. He developed AutoCAD and sold AutoCAD and made a lot of money on the back of that. And so he bought quite a nice country pile, and realized that the modern materials were just not in keeping with the types of materials that were used in his place.
Mm.
And he started sort of looking around and realized that really you just couldn't go to a builder's merchants and buy the stuff that was needed. So he thought, right, well, I'll set up my own place. He was like that. And so this place was like 3 floors. It had sort of cut out models showing details of how to get to Passive House, and it had a whole range of facilities. So it had rainwater harvesting, it had solar PV on the roof, and a whole sort of stack of natural paints, natural clay plasters, and natural insulations, a seminar room, and then a room downstairs to do demos and do things like Cadillac plastering and a whole range of really exciting stuff. So I walked in and said, "Oh, I'd like a job, please." And a chap behind the counter said, "Well, where's your expertise? What's your level of experience?" And I said, "Well, I don't have any. I have no experience and no expertise." So he sort of looked at me and sort of thought, okay. So he said, "Well, we could probably give you a job in the warehouse." And I thought, "Yep, that's fine. I'll take that any day." So I then learned how to drive a forklift truck. And I spent many a happy hour whizzing around on a forklift truck with pallets of natural paints and natural insulations. And so my job was basically fulfilling orders, really. But it was a fantastic team of people who were experts in, PV, sizing PV, experts in rainwater harvesting, how to do that for industrial and sort of residential properties, and then architects, and then sort of very, very practical people that had sort of hands-on knowledge, paints and finishes specialists, and we did lots of seminars. And so there was such a fertile place, and the team that were there, I'm still in touch with today. And they've gone on to do great things. So, for example, Urban is a company that does mass timber buildings here in the UK. They've done, I think, nearly 400 buildings now in their time. And so, two of my colleagues who were at Construction Resources went on to launch Urban. And we're still in touch today, and they are patron members of my company, which I'll go on to in a minute. So yeah, construction resources are amazing. So the environment minister, who was Michael Meacher, for those of us old enough to remember back then. So this was about 1999, 2000. Came in and he didn't seem to know the difference between a solar PV and a solar thermal. And it's like, okie dokie, you're environment minister and you just don't know a lot of stuff, do you? So there was a lot of education that went on, a whole range of colleges, local authorities, schools, professionals, and it was really a sort of upskilling piece and an inspirational place to do all of this stuff as well. And some really interesting projects went through the company, and I gradually moved up and I became paints and finishes specialist, and then moved up to be sort of general operations manager, I suppose. So 5 years later, that was sort of what I was doing. Like most prime movers, they burn bright, and then perhaps too ahead of its time. The construction industry is a pretty fickle industry. It doesn't change quickly, and so all these great new ideas, didn't really land on fertile ground at the end of the day.
Mm.
So from there, I then moved to work at Bioregional. So that's an environmental charity, and they were based at BedZ, and BedZ is Beddington Zero Emission Development, which at the time was the largest sort of eco development of its type. It was the Peabody Trust and about 100 homes and workspaces, community centre, community gardens, and a wood chip fired CHP. So the idea was to inspire. And we had literally people from all over the world come to see BedZ and learn from BedZ. And I also worked with B&Q, and I went to Asia and Hong Kong and Korea and Taiwan to speak to all the B&Q buyers and to try and engage with them around sustainability and get them to understand that as buyers they have a major impact on the world's resources. And So we teamed up with WWF, and so they have a biannual sort of report that looks at wildlife and species around the globe. It's called the Living Planet Report. And that really chimed with them. And being Q at that time, I think we're on quite a good sustainability journey. And we set up One Planet Products, which was one way of trying to access products that were good for the environment. So whether it be low flush loos or rainwater harvesting systems, or whether it be PVs. And so the idea was that you, as a social housing provider or a commercial organization, could access these products quite easily, and they were pre-vetted, pre-tested, and in some cases, we would look to, because you were buying in bulk, so arrange discounts. So yeah, a really interesting scheme and a great place to work. And then I did my thesis looking at the BedZ lessons, trying to understand, the good bits of BedZ, and then perhaps the not so good bits of BedZ, what had worked, what hadn't worked, how much did it really cost, because there was a little bit of a sort of misunderstanding, grey areas around cost, and unfortunately we are a cost-driven industry, so I think we needed to be more transparent about that. So that's what I did my thesis on, and it involved doing questionnaires, all the residents about satisfaction and that type of thing, and doing a little bit of monitoring and so on. So I started working with a chap called John Bootland, and John Bootland ran an organisation called the Sustainable Development Foundation. So he still runs that. And within that organisation, there are a whole range of different organisations. So what John did was sort of divvy up the built environment into archetypes, if you like. So we've got the pre-1919 buildings, the heritage buildings. So there's one organisation that looks after them. And then we've got the Passive House Standard. So he is CEO at the Passive House Trust. And then I started working for the Alliance for Sustainable Building Products, and I've been working for them ever since. So we launched in 2011 at the Palace of Westminster, and I think we really launched as a result of the Green Guide, which was written by the BRE at the time, which was trying to sort of give points or credits, if you like, to sustainable products. And we felt that it was a little bit misleading and not very well thought through. And so we felt that there were other credible systems of working out what is a sustainable product and what isn't. And so we launched without a great idea of exactly what we'd be doing or how we'd be making it work. But we knew that we would be a membership organization. So we started off with one member. And today we have 165 members. So we're mission driven. So our mission is to turn the built environment into a low carbon and healthy endeavor. And so our members sort of sign up to that mission. And the idea is that we help them along that journey and they help us along our journey. And we all move together and we all move forwards together. So within our membership, we have a vast range of companies, from the very large, like Wienerberger, who make bricks, to the very small, to the innovators, to the likes of sort of, mycelium and these types of products. So we are a little bit careful who we allow into membership. We have turned down a number of organizations, mainly because we felt that their journey was perhaps not the right one. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sort of talking about concrete and plastics, really. So we've struggled with both of those. And we've had to remove a few people from membership because the industry is rife with greenwashing.
Yeah.
And, sometimes if you're selling an environmental product, you go too far and overstate the benefits of your product. And, you are then becoming guilty of greenwashing yourself. So we have had to ask a few people to leave in the time. But basically, if you're on the sustainability journey, then that's fine. If you've got a sort of pathway that you can define and show how you're going to move forwards, then, the idea is that we can aim and support you. So the aims of the organization is a sort of knowledge sharing organization. So we try and provide as much information in an interesting format, in a fairly simplified format, as cheaply and cost effectively as possible. So we do lots of webinars, which are in many cases free to sign up to, or very, very cheap, £5 or £10 or that type of thing. And we do a lot of events. And they range from all-day conferences. So we had our ninth Healthy Buildings conference a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. How did
Um,
that,
uh,
how did that go, by the way? Sorry.
yeah, no, it was a really good day. We had the right mix of sort of policy. So we had a very senior person come along from MCHLG to talk to us about the
Right, what's MCLHG? Sorry.
Ministry of Communities, Housing and Local Government.
Right, okay.
Another one of those acronyms that
Yeah.
will no doubt change. So yeah, so he's got the responsibility for the Future Homes Standard.
I see.
So that's going to be coming in the summer.
Right.
And the idea is that all new homes that are built to that standard. And we as an organization teamed up with a whole range of other sustainability organizations to suggest that that standard was not advanced enough. It wasn't responding to the climate crisis sufficiently.
Yeah.
So we gave evidence to the Labour Party and Baroness Taylor to discuss, I suppose, the finer machinations of that standard.
Yeah. What's the main sort of differences? Obviously, the standard, you're thinking it's falling short. Like in a nutshell, maybe a couple of things that you think are, it's not hitting the mark properly or it's missing something.
Yeah, well, I suppose the big thing for us is that we have been trying to lobby and advocate for legislation around embodied carbon
Yeah.
pretty much since we launched. So that's the carbon that's involved in making and manufacturing, transporting our products to site, building the buildings, and then the process of repair and maintenance through the life, and then the end of life.
Mm,
So you asked for a couple of stats. So something like 42% of all annual global CO2 emissions are down to the built environment.
mm.
So that just shows you the
Huge.
massive impact that the built environment has. And then about 1 in 10 of every tons of CO2 that are emitted by that process are around embodied carbon. So, although the operational side of things, so the amount of energy that we spend when we run our buildings has been regulated since the 70s, we have not got around to legislating for the embodied carbon side of things, which for us is a no-brainer and something because it's such a large piece of the pie, needs to be considered. So. Um, I've got some scary stats here. So, um, yeah,
Because this is about how the construction industry is impacting our climate, isn't it? I mean, it's huge, isn't it? I mean, there's houses are being thrown up, office blocks are being thrown up, hotels, schools, hospitals, and I feel like they're being thrown up. Some of it is being done with care, and some of it seems to be. I mean, I was talking to some planners, and it seems like there's a load of loopholes. If it was done before the biodiversity net gains and all that sort of stuff, and then there's like a bit of, like you say, the greenwashing with ESG and all this sort of stuff. But yeah, so have you got some more? Have you got another couple of stats that you could share with us, or
yeah. So I mentioned the 42% is down to the built environment. So the estimate is that 27% of that is our buildings,
mm,
and then the embodied carbon from just four common building materials, so cement, iron, steel, and aluminium, is about 15% of that 27%. So
It's
it
mad.
just shows you like what a major, major impact that is. Um, and then, of course, the cement industry, excuse me, really doesn't do anything else apart from supply the built environment. So something like cement is 2.9 gigatons of CO2 every year. And just behind that, iron and steel come in at just over 2 gigatons of CO2 every year. So these four materials make up a massive, massive chunk. And of course, our work is to look at these and how can we reduce these numbers. And legislating for embodied carbon is one major way that we can help, bring these numbers down. So yeah, so it's tried and tested in so many other countries throughout Europe and America, and indeed in London. If you're doing a development of scale, you will have to do a whole life carbon assessment as well as a circular economy assessment too.
Wow.
Um,
So
so
can
we'd
I just
have
ask you, so with the embodied carbon, if someone isn't clear on what constitutes embodied carbon, so are we talking about like sort of timber construction here, or what does that look like in like real life, as it were?
Yeah, so everything really has embodied carbon. So it's the carbon that is involved in taking and making and transporting that product. So yes, of course, timber has got embodied carbon because it's been cut down, it's been transported to the sawmill, and then the sawmill will only use about 60% of that log, and then the rest is turned into other products. But of course, that sawmill, is generally run on electricity, more and more bio-based, drying sheds and so on. But so yeah, every product has got embodied carbon within it.
Hmm.
Just that some have got a lot more than others. So if you compare, concrete, timber, and steel, so timber will always come out better. So maybe a sort of standard, mid-rise office building using timber as a structural process will probably reduce your embodied carbon by 40 or 50%.
Wow, that's
So,
huge.
so big numbers, absolutely
Yeah.
big numbers. Yeah. So, we as an organization have been trying to understand how we can, reduce the impact more generally of construction. So we have a reuse now campaign. Of course, the construction industry is hugely wasteful. And so we've been looking at how we can reuse much more stuff that comes out of old buildings. So let's not talk about demolition, let's talk about deconstruction.
Ah, good
So
point.
if we deconstruct really carefully, we can salvage, obviously there's a very healthy salvage market, but it tends to be for the more sort of high value, fancy stuff. And still quite a lot gets crushed up and used as sort of aggregate and that type of thing. So, and each product range has got its own different sort of barriers, I suppose, and issues, and insurance and warranties play a big part in that. Um, but yeah, so our reuse now campaign at the moment is just looking at glass partitions. So quite often these just come out and are chucked away. Sometimes the glass goes back to the likes of Pilkington, but not always. Um, but more often than not, these can be quite easily, dismantled quite carefully
Mm.
and moved to another building. And quite often, that may be a sort of office in a factory and they don't really care what it looks like 'cause as such, it's not a fancy, five-star office. They just want something that works. And if it's cheap, then brilliant, But of course, it's always making the line, tying up the sort of the product and then with the end user and the storage in between and how does the end user find out about these surplus products. And there are lots of different tools now that are emerging to help with that.
Hmm.
So, yeah, if you have a look at our website, we've been working in that area for a long time. And we've been trying to look at how we can reuse constructional steel. So, take steel out of old buildings and put them in new buildings. And actually, that now the steel industry has come together. They've realised that, you know, they've got to improve their sustainability story, and so they've come together and they produced guidance about how we can do that.
Mm.
So when we first started looking at this in 2016, I got a letter from British Steel saying this is very dangerous what you're doing. You should desist immediately
Oh, right.
because there could be hairline cracks in the steel, you know, and you could be setting yourself up for, you know, major problems. And we, you know, basically said, well, we didn't think that was true. It was the industry protecting the industry, and you know, we've since worked through all the barriers, and that now has become much more commonplace.
Okay. Well, the reuse of steel and all the other materials, really. So like steel.
Yeah, so we've got a range of case studies on our website.
Okay.
So from domestic buildings, so if you're just doing an extension, you might find that it's cheaper and you're
Mm.
saving carbon. So it's a lovely
Yeah.
win-win story.
And remind us of the website address.
Yeah, so we are the Alliance for Sustainable Building Products. So our website is asbp.org.uk. And you can sign up. We have a free newsletter,
Mm.
um, and you can see more about our work and the resources and outputs that we've got there. So we've been working with the demolition industry, trying to get them to be, you know, to be better at, you know, reusing and reclaiming products. And that's an industry that the you know architects don't generally talk to the demolition industry. And if we want to talk about the circular economy, then you know bringing those two ends of the sort of linear supply chain together is really crucial because the industry have got a real bee in their bonnet about products that are useless when it comes to the end of life because they're mainly composite products,
Yeah.
you know, things that are glued to other things that
Mhm.
can't be taken apart and just have to be put in the bin.
Yeah.
You know, there's lots of learning that the demolition industry are keen to share with the design industry,
Yeah.
and vice versa when all's said and done.
Yeah, and of course, I suppose if you think about it, most stuff in our world is all like you just said, actually, is all stuck together, isn't it? And they're using, non-bio-based materials, so we can't. It's very hard to separate them, to take them back to their original kind of like entities. So then it just creates more problems. So again, it's a sort of from our perspective, it's a call for more bio-based materials or more sensitive use of how we, you know stick stuff together. And that doesn't have to be using like oil based or petrol based or petrochemical based products, but like we used to have doweling and sort of pegs and the Lego brick kind of concept, where
Mm.
things still can be drilled and stuck together, but you can undo the screws, and so you can it makes more sense for reuse. I think, like you say, probably down the line, design will change, or it has to change, really, isn't it? If we're going to hit, well, we're not going to hit net zero because people, I think, are too self, I don't know, the companies are still too, it's like Kodak, isn't it? Or whatever, they produced the
Yeah.
camera, digital came in, and it's like, oh no, we can't do that. Whereas this is the other way around. It's like we're doing all this stuff using all this you know, high construction production manufacturing kind of synthesis. And really, what we need to be doing is simplifying it back to how we were before, I suppose.
In some ways, yeah. So designing for deconstruction and reuse is, you know, quite a simple thing to do, but you've got to do it right from the inception. And
Yeah.
so, you know, so when I was talking about the circular economy statements, so if you're looking to build in London, that's something you need to do, and design and deconstruction and reuse is part and parcel of that.
Mm.
So, you know, we know that quite often they get farmed off to consultants and they sort of tick a few boxes, charge a chunk of money, and that just gets submitted to the planning people. So Westminster refused a planning application on the basis of a very poor circular economy statement quite recently.
Okay.
And so that's really good. It shows that this has got
Yeah.
teeth now.
Yeah.
So, and of course, you know, if you're reusing products within a building, you're really reducing your embodied carbon of the building. So if you're trying to get that embodied carbon number down, then reusing products is one great way. Because in most cases there's maybe a small amount of cleaning, or like with bricks, for example, and transportation, but the majority of the carbon is already spent.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the building, is really sort of should be bio-based products as much as you can.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, but, it's quite difficult for architects to understand perhaps, what is a good product and what isn't a good product. There's quite a lot of work that architects have to do to sort of go through that process. And one solution to that is an eco label, which is called Nature Plus. That's a European label. They're headquartered in Germany, and we are UK representatives of that label. And it's only awarded to the most sustainable products.
Okay.
And so there are only, I think, about 600 products that have got the certification, and basically 85% of your product needs to come from renewable sources.
Mm.
So bio-based sources, in other words, sources that you can grow.
Okay.
So that, no plastics would get through, no metals.
Mm.
So it's predominantly bio-based with an element, of okay, we need a synthetic binder or whatever it might be.
Mm. Yeah.
And then we as ASBP, we have a natural fiber insulation group.
Okay.
So we brought together all of the guys who sell or manufacture or supply natural fiber insulation in the UK. When we first brought them together, they were a bit wary,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's like, okay, these are my competitors. And so the first couple of meetings were quite tricky, and the fact that nobody was really wanting to talk or say very much.
Mm.
And we've been going for 5 years now on those, and it's completely different.
Mm.
It's like a really useful sort of process for learning from each other, collaboration,
Mm.
and what we've done is produced a whole range of quality outputs, so seminars, webinars, briefing papers around natural fiber insulation. What are the benefits of natural fiber insulation? And it's not just about their thermal properties, but its acoustic properties, and it also prevents things like overheating. So overheating, comfortable indoor environment is crucial really to our sort of our way of being.
Yeah.
And we have quite a narrow operating temperature, and there is real concern that quite a lot of buildings will be overheating. I know it's sort of only spring, but it so if you can prevent that, then all for the better.
Yeah.
So
Did
there are a whole range of natural fiber insulations that will help
yeah.
prevent that.
Yeah, I just did a podcast actually recently with Lambda, the LAMDA, this innovative flat panel wool insulation.
Okay.
And what they're doing is, and they're leaving it exposed, so you can, I mean, you can render over it and all that kind of thing. But
Mm.
I was intrigued by it because of the finish on it from a design point of view.
Hmm.
And also, I mean, just learning about, how sheep wool work, I mean, it's kind of things that nature has devised, isn't it, really? And then
Yeah, absolutely.
we try and be so clever and engineer it out almost, really, isn't it? And try and reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, um, most insulation is synthetic, so it's a
Yeah.
byproduct of
And
the
the
petrochemical
VOCs,
industry.
the VOCs for your chest.
Yeah, so and of course, and you're cutting it on site, so
Yeah, of
you're immediately releasing huge amounts of microplastics into the environment, into
course.
the air, into the watercourses, um, and at the end of the day, it will shrink over time, so it won't provide that sort of thermal performance that you think you might get, and then we have that sort of performance gap coming in. So you design your building to operate like this, but it doesn't.
No,
And there's a whole range of reasons why it might not.
yeah,
So yeah, there are a whole range of natural alternatives to these synthetic products.
yeah,
Um, we perhaps don't manufacture some of them here in the UK. We do manufacture sheep's wool
Yeah.
insulation. So there are only two, well, three, I suppose, manufacturers of natural fibre insulation in the UK. So there's Indie Nature in Scotland making insulation from hemp, and then Thermofleece making insulation from sheep's wool. But we also work quite a lot with wood fibre,
Yeah.
which is tend to be made in Austria and Germany,
Mhm.
and then brought in. So yeah, there's a whole range of natural fiber insulations that will help with,
Yeah.
the whole range of things. I mean, sheep's wool insulation, for example, is quite good at cleaning the air.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can. I mean, it needs to be exposed to the air, but yeah, and we also have a natural paints and finishes group.
Yeah.
Um, so most paints, are full of plastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there was a report about a year ago that suggested that actually paints and finishes were one of the largest sources of microplastics into our environment, which I think to most people
Mm.
they don't know that.
No.
So they go, it's a water-based paint, so it must be okay,
Yeah.
and I can wash my brushes under the sink and
Yeah.
everything's fine, but actually, no, it's not fine because what you're painting plastic onto your walls. Is that what you really want?
Mm.
And at the end of the day, plastic isn't very breathable. I mean, breathable is a difficult term, but
Yeah.
basically means is it's sort of moisture diffusive. Does it allow moisture to come and go? And so if you've ever seen any paint that's blistered, what's happening is that there's sort of there's water that hasn't can't get anywhere. It's trapped. So
Mm.
you'll often see, particularly in bathrooms, in sort of areas where it's damp and wet, you'll see this blistered paint,
Yeah.
and that's why because it's made up of plastic,
Yeah.
and there are plenty of alternatives. So that's the sort of I suppose that's the sort of thing that makes me a bit cross. We know all the answers to the problems that we seem to, have fallen into. So,
Yeah. It's also
you know,
short term. I was going to say it's short termism as well, isn't it? Because you think, like even if you're just like a homeowner and you just want to buy some paint to paint your bathroom, like you say, you go into your store, your normal, your local store. That's what most people will go to, or even a supermarket. They're selling them now. They go in there, they'll buy the paint that they like the color of. They'll read the side, like you say, and say, oh, it's water based, low
mm,
VOCs. Oh, it must
mm,
be okay. And then
mm,
they put it on the wall because it's cheap. And then
mm,
like sort of 4 years down the line when it's all blistering, they're gonna have to peel it all off, take it off, put the sealant on, put this on, more VOC stuff, and it's actually greater expense. So and it's more effort when you could be sitting having a couple of or glass of wine somewhere instead of painting, you're repainting. So it's kind of, but it's hard, isn't it? I think as well with the way we consume things, whether it's TV, digital media. If you look at Instagram, years ago we would get Life magazine or something like that, and we would look at an image, or a record. We were talking to Julian Treasure about years ago. We would get an album, we'd get vinyl, and we would sit there for ages looking at the vinyl sleeve. And the way we approach things was a lot slower. It was almost
yeah,
like slow living, and now it's like fast, 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 and we don't think. And I suppose again, something for me for biophilic design is about reversing that. It's about
mm,
reconnecting with living systems, life, living entities rather than,
mm.
distractions or fast stuff or, it's about living the way nature is, I suppose, or the way we're meant to be in a bio-based environment, in a bio-based way of living, I suppose, really.
Yeah, I mean, there are plenty of amazing examples of really amazing buildings that, they've done post-occupancy evaluation that shows that people are happier,
Yeah,
calmer,
yeah,
and therefore more productive.
yeah,
And so for most organizations, staff costs are your biggest cost. And if you can get happy and productive staff that stay with you,
yeah,
I mean, you're a happy and productive company.
yeah,
So, I mean, people are waking up to the fact that, indoor air quality is really important, and then also the look and the feel of the building.
yeah,
So, if you've got exposed timber, I mean, it's immediately calming.
yeah,
So your pulse rate will drop, your breathing will become steadier, and you'll be calmer, clearer, and more able to think, through technical problems
Yeah.
and all of that. So,
Yeah.
I've got a list of really buildings that I really love.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So the Enterprise Centre is an amazing building. So that's University of East Anglia.
Okay.
And it's maybe, I don't know, about 12, maybe more, 15 years old now. So Archetype are the architects, and Archetype are an amazing firm of architects. They really understand this whole sort of journey, and they do amazing buildings. And they also do research as well. So they've been, researching. Uh, they've gone back to 5 passive house schools that they've produced, and they've been looking at the indoor air quality and trying to understand, how that's working. Um, so lots of really exciting research. Yeah. So the Enterprise Centre is just a glorious building, and a whole variety of different products, including thatched roofs with solar PVs sat in it, which
Oh,
is
really?
such an amazing juxtaposition. You've got the old and the new,
Yeah.
the traditional and the modern, and it works a treat, and it's a lovely, lovely place to learn. So the students love it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so universities have got some great buildings. There's in Bradford. Bradford's got a hempcrete building, which is really impressive. And then, yeah, lots of universities have got some pretty amazing buildings. I think the first building that I went into was done by an architect called Fran Bradshaw. She works for Anne Thorne Architects, and so she decided to try and build to passive house standards, which is super duper low energy standard, but using straw bale in a traditional way. And yeah, so she completed that quite some while ago. There's a really nice write up about it in the Passive House Plus magazine. Um, and I visited there, and um, it's one of those things you sort of go into the building and it's quite hard to describe, but it just feels so calming.
Really?
And the acoustics are so amazing. So it's lots of clay plaster on the inside and sort of, natural floors, timber floors. So it's just calming and really lovely, acoustics. So great I play the guitar, so great for, playing acoustic guitar. And it just felt so different to, your average home, I suppose.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, I've really admired Fran Bradshaw. She's sits on the board of the AECB, and so that's the Association of Environmentally Conscious Builders, and they've been going since the beginning of time. I don't know when they set up, but I've been a member of them since 1999 or something. And they're a membership organisation, and they do conferences and events, and they also quite often have local groups. So we have a local group here in Kent that meets up and once a month has a beer, has a chat, and it's a nice way to meet people.
Yeah.
So there's that sort of sociable element to things too. So yeah, that's one to look at. And then I mentioned mass timber earlier. So I am a key
Mm.
proponent of mass timber.
Yeah.
We think it's like a sort of solution for the mid-rise, sort of 4 stories up to maybe 8 stories. And it just looks so beautiful. And if you can expose the surfaces, and that's more difficult, then it just smells lovely as well.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
and there's some great examples of those. So there's the black and white building. It's in Shoreditch, so that's Waltherton Architects. And then recently, the first mass timber building since Grenfell has been completed in Cardiff. It's called the Cascade, and it's been a long, long time coming. But it's the first residential building that's been completed in mass timber since Grenfell,
Okay.
because Grenfell really put a complete kibosh on building with combustible materials. So all bio-based materials are combustible, really, one
Mm.
way or another. And so there's been real stasis in this. And so I'm really pleased that I haven't been, but we had a presentation at our Healthy Buildings the other day, from Urban, and so Urban have been involved in that project for since its inception. Um, and yeah, so if you look at our website, there's a really nice presentation from Urban about the building and how they managed to navigate their way through Building Safety Act and those types of things.
Wow. Would you send links to these things, and I'll put it with the spiel that goes with the podcast here, so people
Yeah,
can go
yeah,
off and look at the links on your website as well, which would be amazing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Happily do that. Yeah, there's a range of other buildings I've got on my list,
Yeah.
but I don't know if we're running out of
I know,
time.
just tell us some buildings. That'd be great. We can. There's definitely time for examples.
So I was particularly lucky, I suppose, when COVID struck. I had moved out of London and I'd moved to the seaside. I always wanted to live by the seaside. I just thought I never would, being a Londoner, I suppose. But
Yeah.
so I escaped from London. I moved down here, and I knew of a place called the Pines Calyx, which is a round chalk building. And so they use the chalk, it's from the White Cliffs of Dover, so very chalky soil. So they literally dug the soil and rammed it into the walls to make the building. And there's loads and loads of natural light. And at the time, I think it was completed in 2006. It was the lowest embodied carbon sort of conference centre in the whole of the UK.
Yeah.
So I knew when COVID came along that they wouldn't be able to use that building, and then there's also an associated Airbnb which they also would not be able to use, and so I managed to move in. Um, so I stayed in this luxury four-bedroom Airbnb for COVID, and had the access to 5 acre garden that the Pines Calyx is set in, and access to the building. And so I've done a few webinars from the building. It's a little bit like, I think if you're a Christian or you're religious, you walk into a mosque or a temple and you just get that feeling. So for me, that's my temple, if you like, or my church. I sort of walk into it and it's just so calming. I suppose it's partly to do with the mass. I mean, the walls are massive. Um, but yeah, and it's got a green roof and loads, of say, of lovely natural daylight, and the chalk is exposed, so it's such a beautiful building. Yeah, I'm really, really, really fond of it.
Nice.
And if anybody wants to come to have a site visit, I'm sure we can organise something. It's between Deal and Dover in a place called St Margaret's Bay, which is itself a beautiful bay, and it's where Ian Fleming
Wow.
wrote many of his novels. So his house is down there on the seafront.
Wow.
So yeah, that's probably my top 10 buildings. Um,
That's great.
and then I understand that you've probably been doing podcasts with the Department of Education, and so they've got their first biophilic school,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, which I think is called St Mary's.
Yeah.
And they're doing some post-occupancy evaluation with Derby University. I don't know how that's going actually, but they're, looking at user patterns and people's conceptions and responses to the building. The Department of Education is a good client.
Mm.
They have set embodied carbon targets on
Yeah.
all new schools.
Yeah.
And really, to get to those targets, you don't have a great deal of choice but to build out of timber and
Mm.
bio-based products.
Mm.
So the Department of Education understands that they want a quality building, they want a quality building that's going to last, and they want it to be low embodied carbon as well as being low operational, of course.
Yeah.
And actually, so they are a particularly really good client,
Yeah.
and I would herald them as sort of like for other clients to look at how they do things, how they specify their buildings, and to see them, I think, as a sort of prime mover.
Yeah.
So I mean, the Biophilic School, we've had a couple of presentations on it. I mean, you know. I don't know. There are some things, I mean, it's got a round it's got a concrete slab,
Yeah.
which is, I mean, they say it's polished and so it's got no finishes on, but you don't need to use concrete actually.
Mm. Yeah.
You can use
Uh,
screw piles,
which one? Sorry, you can use what? Sorry,
screw piles.
screw
So
piles. What's
they
that?
it basically looks like a gigantic screw.
Okay.
Yeah, and so they're just screwed into the ground, and then you build your build. You get it all level and build your building off that.
Oh,
So there's a really nice example by Agile Homes. It's called Wolverley School, and I'll put the link in the chat. So or follow up, and yeah, so they've used screw piles. So that cuts down because concrete is so heavy when it comes to embodied carbon, and if you're doing a slab, then that's a lot of concrete. So if we can reduce the amount of concrete wherever we can, and we're never going to get rid of concrete
Mm.
because it's just so useful.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be a compromise. So with mass timber buildings, quite often it's like a concrete, maybe plinth or first floor, and you build from that. But this school, is built off screw piles and then bio-based products basically throughout.
Yeah.
So it's a fine example. So we can do all of these things.
Mm.
That's the sort of thing that sticks in my throat. We know how to build to low embodied carbon with bio-based products. We
Mm.
know how to build to passive house standards. So
Yep.
that's 20 times better than building regulations. So, your bills will be 30 or 40 pounds a year as
Yep.
opposed to 1.5 grand,
I know it's mad.
So
Yeah, mad,
um,
mad difference, isn't it?
mad
It's
difference. Yeah.
different. Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, these, we know all the solutions,
Yeah.
and we know all the problems. It's just sort of tying those things together, and I suppose spreading understanding and knowledge and literacy and understanding and all of those things. And I suppose that's what we try and do as an organization is really
Yeah.
spread that knowledge, spread that understanding. So I'm just going to give a quick plug.
Yeah.
So we this year we're celebrating 20 years of the Sustainable Development Foundation. And within that time, it's sort of given birth to a whole range of different organizations, of which we are one. And so we've teamed up this year to celebrate. And so our annual awards are going to be in conjunction with the Passive House Trust.
Okay.
And so we're basically there's an open call for entries now. And the awards ceremony will be on the 24th of June in a very swanky venue overlooking the Thames. So it'll be the afternoon. We'll have the sort of members of the organisations, and in the evening, it's open to everybody. And it's a rooftop terrace. Hopefully, it'll be nice weather, and we can
Lovely.
have a glass of wine and celebrate. Some really fantastic buildings, some really fantastic products, and yeah. So we'd really welcome your entries. It's free. We don't. It doesn't cost anything to enter the awards.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's going to be really interesting, really vibrant, and I'm
Good.
looking forward to those. Yeah,
Yeah. Sounds amazing.
and
Well, go on.
I've got one more quick plug that I quite like to mention. So we as an organisation, and this is more sort of biophilia really,
Yeah.
we've just finished a project called Impact, which is try to make the link between the buildings and where the products in that building have come from.
Hmm. Oh,
So the idea is you go into the building, you've got a QR code on the outside of the building, you put
yeah.
your phone on that, and then that takes you back to, in this case, it's their mass timber buildings, back to the forest of origin.
Great.
And then you can get to see a little bit more about that forest. You can understand a bit more about the sustainable forestry management practices that enable improved levels of biodiversity.
Mm.
So we've been working in this project. It's been funded by Built by Nature,
Okay.
which I don't know if you're familiar with them,
Mm.
but it's a philanthropic grant-giving organization. They're based in Amsterdam. They had spent millions of euros, and I mean millions, in this space. And so they have a whole range of research projects, and it's hard even for me to sort of keep up with all of the outputs. Um, so yeah, so our project tried to make that link because the more enlightened clients are starting to wake up to the fact that, okay, I want to specify on the basis of, let's say, biodiversity.
Yeah.
How do I do that? And you can't do that at the moment.
Mm.
So enlightened clients who want to do that, then this is one way of doing it. And so we've been working with PEFC, which is a chain of custody certification system, means your timber is sustainably managed. And so we have been working with them to see if this process, this biodiversity management measurement, can be part and parcel of the PEFC certification system. And there's no doubt about it that there's a disconnect
Yeah.
between these guys here who are building the buildings,
Yeah.
supplying the products, and over here, the forests of origin and what's happening.
Yeah.
And quite often, if you ask these guys, what's going on, where has this product come from, they've got no idea.
Yeah.
If you ask them anything about the sort of forest origin, they don't know.
No.
And so there's a real disconnect. But there is this new legislation that's coming in. It's called the EU Deforestation Legislation Regulation, so EUDR. And it basically means that every product is going to have to be traced back to its place of origin, and that's every product: coffee, bamboo, flooring, timber, everything that's grown. So
Yeah.
the idea is that's going to help cut down on illegal and uncertified sources of these types of products.
Mm.
So I mean, I know we're not in the EU at the moment, but if you are selling a product that you're going to try and sell into Europe, you are going to have made sure that you've satisfied this regulation. So
Mm.
you're going to have to know a lot more about where your products have come from and what's going on there.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah.
yeah, I think also for me, I think for by help trying to help people specify. I think if you're a designer or an interior designer or a facility manager or whatever you are, developer, and for for the sort of concept, the biophilia hypothesis, if you want, the biophilic design, even if we don't articulate this is a biophilic design kind of idea, but
Mm,
as from us, from a specification perspective,
mm,
we think of like every decision we make in the built environment, does
mm,
this align to the biophilia hypothesis?
mm,
Does it enhance life? Is it bio-based? Or is it going to destroy life? Is it going to
mm,
harm life? Like, so is there pollutants in there? Is it um is it going to release VOCs, or is it actually going to make the place more harmonious? Is it good colorway and all that sort of stuff? But I think if we applied that across construction, I think as a theory, as a kind of ethics, as a code of ethics almost, or as a whatever you want to say,
mm,
we would be designing so much more consciously, I think.
mm,
So for me, that's kind of where I am with biophilic design. If you want, I see it as a sort of, I suppose, a hug, if you want, across the whole built environment, from, physical and mental health into, in terms of putting plants in the corner and design and wood grain and all that kind of thing. But the
mm,
ultimate thing is, it helps our planet.
mm.
We have to be designing with those two things in mind, people and planet, and
Mm,
ultimately that'll bring money. It brings the prosperity, you know.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, as well as happiness and all the other stuff that
Yeah.
perhaps you don't put a value on immediately.
Yeah.
So, we're a very cost-driven industry.
Mm.
But of course, the sort of more enlightened clients realize that it's worth spending a little bit more perhaps now up
Yeah.
front
Mm.
and making sure you've got a happy and healthy sort of workforce working in a comfortable biophilic building,
Yeah.
and making sure that you've got that sort of level now. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we do see changes every day, which is really positive. We need to get a move on with stuff.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
it is a source of frustration to me that we know all the answers, but we don't seem to implement them. And
Mm,
that implementation is key. So knowledge, sharing knowledge and knowing where to go to, I think is really key. So there's loads of information on our website about
mm,
products and
yeah,
most of our members, will be involved or selling or manufacturing
mm,
products that we would recommend. And there's loads of information about specification, and we can help you along that journey. So yeah,
yeah,
do get in touch, sign up to our free newsletter.
yeah.
Our next event is on reuse of glass partitionings. So if you're interested in that whole reuse piece, then sign up for that. And we've got loads of events through the year. So um,
Amazing. Yeah. Well, it'd be lovely to continue the conversation and hopefully we could do a joint event somehow. I can bring like the designers,
yeah,
interior designers and specification sort of thing so they can actually see maybe factory walks or something like that. I think would be
okay.
great. And actually walking around the Pines Calyx place, I think that sounds really good. I'm looking for a venue for the conference, so I might be having a look at that.
Yeah, I mean it's just outside Dover, so it takes about an hour and a half from King's Cross,
Yeah.
so it's not too far. And yeah, it is absolutely delightful because it's set in acres of garden, and then
Yeah.
just down there you've got the chalk cliffs and the sea, uh,
Amazing. Yeah.
which is yeah, it's a really beautiful place.
Oh, fantastic.
All
Well, so
right.
before I let you go, I'm going to ask you the
Mm,
final question that I
okay.
ask everybody who comes on the podcast, so you're not getting
Yeah.
away with it.
Okay.
If you could paint the world with a magic brush of biophilia,
Ah.
what would it look like?
Well, I've got a magic brush actually. So yeah, so we'd all be living in buildings that are made from predominantly bio-based products and finished with natural materials, with access to light and comfortable temperatures, low energy bills, and then really, I suppose, access to nature and access to a broader community. So whether that be community gardens. So in Deal, we have a community hop growing scheme. So people grow hops in their gardens, and then we all harvest them and then take them to a beer place, and then they're made into a local beer. So that's one fine example. So those types of sort of community actions and yeah, it'd be nice if we could afford to live in these types of places and trying to rebuild the housing market is something that we could do with dealing with but yeah, so that's how it would be. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast.